So you might have heard that greater government budget deficits can lead to a crowding out effect on investment. Well, let's take a look and understand why that is the case. So to understand how budget deficits can crowd out investment, we just have to think about that loanable funds analysis that was covered in a previous video. And if you just think about it, even if you don't refer to the graph, let's just make sense of it. So far we've seen that savings is supplied by savers, which are either people like you and me that do not spend all of their income, or the government that do not spend all of their tax revenue. So those are the different sources of savings. And if you think about the government on their own, they can go from saving money to no longer saving, so a balanced budget, which would be a reduction in the amount of savings in the economy, or they can go from balanced budget to a budget deficit, which is them now borrowing, so still again less savings in the economy, or from a small budget deficit to a larger budget deficit, still less money in the economy. So as long as you're moving from being a government surplus, like a budget surplus, to balanced budget, to a small deficit, to a larger deficit, you're moving in the same direction, which is the government is saving less. And in all of those cases, graphically speaking, if we think about the graph, the supply of savings would shift left. But if you think about it from a without graph perspective, it means that as they're saving less, there's less money available to be borrowed. As there is less money available to be borrowed, what could we expect to happen to interest rates? Well, naturally, if there's less sources of people that have money to spare to lend out, well, if there's less of that and there's still the same amount of people that want to borrow that money, well, there's going to be the same people chasing less money. Therefore, we could expect interest rates to rise. And if you were to draw out the graph, you would see that pretty rapidly as well. And as interest rates rise, well, then there's going to be less investors that want to borrow money to work on certain projects that will be willing to borrow money if the interest rates are now greater. And we also see that graphically. And that process there is what we call the crowding out effect on investment. So as governments spend more, they actually hurt private businesses to some extent in their own projects. So that's why there's some people that are proponents of not having the government do too much to facilitate domestic industries or private industries, because that's the kind of situation that happens. So as soon as the government undertakes a massive project in the economy, it creates employment, it creates a lot of demand for workers, which are taken away possibly from private companies. There's part of that happens, but also through this process, it leads to less money being available, drives up interest rates, and as those interest rates are higher, these private companies have to pay greater interest rate if they still want to keep borrowing, and because of that, there's going to be less investment in the market. So we have to understand that increased government spending, although it's good, it can help out the economy because government spending is one of those components of GDP. If at the same time it reduces investment, that's kind of a negative there. So typically speaking, if you were to analyze this further, the crowding out effect is not necessarily one-to-one, like an increase in government spending of $1 million is going to lead to a decrease in spending of private companies by $1 million. It's typically less than that, so it's not completely major, but it's something that's considered and is analyzed much at a greater depth in more advanced classes. So that's just something to keep in mind. And that's just an application of this loanable funds analysis. So as soon as we understand how interest rates are determined, we can now start understanding how, as some of these change, it's going to lead to a difference in equilibrium in terms of interest rates and how much money is being borrowed and being spent by these private companies. So I hope you found this one interesting. Catch you in the next one. If you found this video interesting, please consider subscribing or joining my class where I guide you to apply and expand on the information found in these videos to real life examples. Have a good day.